Welcome to Insights from the Couch, where real conversations meet real life at midlife.
We're Colette and Laura, two therapists and best friends, walking through the journey right alongside you. Whether you're feeling stuck, restless, or just unsure of what's next, this is a space for honest conversations, messy truths, and meaningful change.
And our Midlife Masterclass is now open. If you're looking to level up, get into action, and make midlife the best season yet, go to insightsfromthecouch.org and join our waitlist. Now let's dive in. Hi guys, I'm sitting here today with Keesha Scott, and I can't wait for you all to meet her and hear about her. And unfortunately, Laura couldn't be here today, but welcome, Keesha. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a great topic. We're going to dive into parenting teens, arguably the hardest thing in life, I think. Like harder than running a company, harder than a marriage. I have two daughters in their 20s, so I want to dig into all of your wealth of knowledge and expertise. But first, tell our listeners a little bit about you, your background, and what got you into this work.
Sure. So I'm a certified parenting coach. I'm a mom of three. I run a podcast called Cake for Dinner, and I've written a book by the same name, which will come out next year. But my personal background and experience, I have a master's in psychology. I would say a lot of my experience is really just rooted in struggle and hard-earned wisdom. I've parented myself. I was a troubled teen myself, and I've spent many years in the mental health space. My husband and I founded Guardian Recovery in 2008, which is a national behavioral health company, and I oversee the adolescent program. So I am knee-deep in teenagers on every front.
Wow. And that's such a calling too, because we desperately need this right now. I mean, teens are facing struggles that they weren't facing years ago. The world's gotten much, much harder, and I'm
Very
sure
true.
you see that. So I am just so awed by the fact that you're doing this work. I think it's incredibly difficult. So tell me a little bit. Let's go back first, because I'm so curious. When you say I was a troubled teen, I feel like I was too, although I was so much fun back then. Tell me a little bit about what you were like as a teenager, or what you went through, however much you're comfortable.
Sure. So I'm also sober 23 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So with that comes a little bit of a rocky period, I think, for most sober people. I would say as a teenager, I grew up in a great family. I have three brothers. Often you hear in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, stories of troubled family environment. I did not have that experience.
Right.
I had a great childhood, but I do think I always, just for whatever reason, felt a little bit inadequate in my own space, in my own world. I had trouble like navigating emotions and that sort of thing. We moved to Boca Raton, Florida when I was in sixth grade. I attribute that to a lot of my downfall, really.
Really? How so?
Because I grew up, in this small town in North Carolina. If you could run fast, you were popular. That was the end of the story. There was no fucking name brands. That wasn't a thing, and then we all of a sudden were plucked out of that and put into, a very wealthy town where the focus was on very different things.
Yeah.
I was in sixth grade, which is, for girls, like such a big deal,
Vulnerable age.
Such a vulnerable age.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was noteworthy is my older brother, he went to high school and my two younger brothers went to elementary school. So for the first time I was alone. I was facing things like sex and drugs and things that I wasn't comfortable with.
Having to make new friends, too.
All at once. So I think, for me, moving at that age was really tough. And I, started to separate a little bit from my family. And by the time I got to high school, I, was struggling a lot. I started to dabble in drugs and alcohol. One of the reasons I love the work I do, and I specifically love teenage girls, is because when I was in high school, I had a basketball coach. His name was Coach John Jones, a little shout out. And I believe to this day that he changed my life.
Wow.
He was so motivated and so just immersed in the growth, my growth and helping me. And as I have parented my own kids, I don't see a ton of that. I think everybody's a little bit more self-focused these days. There's so much pressure. And also there's so much pressure on the coaches and teachers. He was
So much.
he would help me after school and I think that really shaped the trajectory of my life. So I really am committed to trying to be that for someone else.
I think that's huge. I really do, because a lot of teens or a lot of adults tell stories like that of feeling lost or going through a really hard time as a teenager. And there was one person in their life, and it often wasn't the parent necessarily. There are certain limitations to how much influence sometimes a parent can have. But if you have that person who believes in you, who can get in there with you and guide you and model, it can change the trajectory of your life. So I'm curious too, before we get into, some helpful tidbits for parents who are dealing with teens, what do you see as the landscape for teenagers today? What's different? I mean, I know every generation says, oh, it's not the way it used to be, but I really don't think it's the way it used to be. And I think things have changed. Some things have even gotten worse than 10 years ago when my daughters were teenagers. Sure. So what do you think are some of the actual stressors and challenges for teens now?
I think there's a few obvious things. I think technology and, the social media being on the scene is certainly troublesome, specifically for that age. When we were younger, when I'm 51, so when I was younger, there were no cell phones, no social media. So if I made it through a tough day at school and I made it home, I was home safe. Yeah. These kids are never home safe because the world is in your pocket, on your phone at all times. So I think that creates a tremendous amount of ongoing present stress that we probably didn't have to deal with. With that also comes a lot of body image stuff because the image that they see is often not realistic, right? And especially
or not real. Half the time
right?
It's AI, yeah.
Not even real. Not real for different reasons.
Right.
But I deal with teenage girls a lot, and body image, and that is a huge, huge sore spot. I don't remember as a teenager caring about my body really, or being super. I was very athletic. I was into sports. There wasn't a huge focus on that. Also, girls dress different many, many years ago. There's a real focus on their bodies. And so I think social media, technology, body image, and then also for me, I'm in the substance use space and, the drugs now are extremely potent and different. THC by itself is, doubled in potency.
Yeah.
So you're just dealing with intensity on every front.
Right.
So I think a lot of the stuff is the same. Probably the feelings that you and I had are similar, but the world around them is very different and just in large part more intense.
The intensity has ratcheted up, and the accessibility of all these factors you describe. I'm 52, so I'm right there with you. Now, I was very, very wrapped up in body image as a teenager, but maybe that was more of an effortless thing for you if you were athletic, but we didn't have the comparison in our face. And we know psychologically that we're comparative creatures.
Right.
So to constantly see for a young brain what you're supposed to look like, and you don't feel like you can be that, or you post something and nobody responds or likes, or you see that your friends have gone to an event and you were excluded. I mean, the ways that you can be hurt and ostracized.
That part is so intense. When my teenagers are 19, and when I first learned about Snapchat and Snap Map, I remember we were at the mall and my daughter looked at her phone and she was like, oh my gosh, so-and-so is here. And I'm like, how do you know? And she showed me.
The little avatar
and
people.
You see all the little avatar people. Yeah. It's crazy. And so the idea that there could be a party that she wasn't included in and you could see everyone that was there, it was wow. I mean, the emotions that they have to navigate and the frequency that they have to navigate them is just on steroids.
Yeah, it's too much. And it's too much for adults. So
It's too much
for
for
a
adults.
developing brain,
Mhm.
if we're about the same age,
Mhm.
maybe you played sports and I didn't, but we were running around the neighborhood and, there was all of that healthy outdoor activity. And like you said, you come home and you're safe. It's the TV or you're on the phone with your friend, maybe
Yeah.
gossiping about the boy you like, but your brain is not constantly being bombarded with all
Well,
of these
also, I
signs.
don't know how your family was growing up, but I grew up in a family where there was one phone and it was in the living room. So if you
Mm,
wanted privacy, you had to like tuck your body behind the couch. You know what I mean? There was only so much like, privacy you were going to get. These kids all have cell phones. They're in their room. They have access to the entire internet in their
yeah,
room alone at 14. I
right.
mean,
Which is
it's
scary.
just wild.
It's really scary.
So with that being said, the experiences that they're having, especially the youth that I deal with, these kids are, dabbling in drugs and alcohol. They're typically, promiscuous, the things that they're dealing with are already a little heightened. It's a lot. It's tough.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me a little bit about this from the behavioral aspect. You
Mhm.
have these treatment centers. So, and we're talking about dabbling and drugs and alcohol, and
Mhm.
maybe there's promiscuity. What are some of the issues that get a teen or that not get a teen in, but like that somebody ends up feeling like their kid needs treatment?
Mhm.
What are some of the markers for that? Because when I was young,
Sure.
everybody was dabbling and everything. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but
Right. I think that's a good point because I think there is some misconception around I don't know, I think parenting has gotten a little bit misguided in that, right? That
mhm,
like a lot of people, and myself included, buy into this idea that kids do this, right? Teenagers are tough. Teenagers drink. Teenagers smoke weed. We all smoked weed,
right?
so
Because that's how our generation
right.
was. Yeah.
The thing is that you can't be asleep at the wheel as a parent anymore. It's just the
Yeah.
marijuana these kids are smoking is not the weed we were smoking. The things that these kids have access to, it is not the
Yeah.
same.
Much
So
less fentanyl
right.
and
So
right. Yeah.
parenting just, unfortunately or fortunately, it isn't just this, it isn't the same anymore,
Yeah.
So I think, in large part, we as a society and as parents have to wake up a little bit and we have to move the needle and parent a little bit differently.
Yep.
But in terms of what people seek treatment for, I think it's when kids go beyond the dabbling, right?
Mm,
And it starts to impact their behavior. Some early signs are, kids beginning to not communicate at all,
mm.
grades dropping, socializing becoming very different.
Like isolating,
I
withdrawing.
Isolating, but also the kids that they choose to be around. Oftentimes, kids that start to struggle on a level that needs treatment, they stop engaging in their sports or whatever their extracurricular activities are.
Okay.
Their life will start to look different for sure. I believe in outsourcing as much as possible, like we let off with my basketball coach. Kids don't want to talk to their moms all the time. I happen
Right.
to have kids that like tell me everything, and my friends are always like, "You're so lucky." I'm like, "Not really." Like, it's not always fun to hear,
Right.
but
But it is good. It is
yes.
healthy.
But not all kids are talkers.
Right.
Not all kids want to tell their parents, and
Absolutely.
not all moms are equipped to handle the information. And I
That's so
think
true.
part of being a parent is like putting your ego down, knowing when you need to outsource, knowing when you need help, Parents call me a lot for that. And you can get, sometimes other people can get much further with your kid,
It's so true.
you know?
Especially the right person who understands, gives the kid space to unpack, and then you can really get in there and help coach and guide the kid and the family. I mean, do you
And
work with both or?
I do. So I'm a certified parenting coach. So I often start with the parents,
Yeah.
but my love is teenagers. There's just nothing I love more than being in a room with a teenage girl who won't speak, won't
Wow.
talk to their parents, is angry, is acting out. I just identify so much with that. Like I'm 51, but all of a sudden I'm 15, you know?
You can
And
relate.
I can relate and I love it. And there's nothing more rewarding because while that seems so tough to people, they're so much more predictable and so much easier.
Yeah.
They want out. They want to talk. So if you can provide them a space that's somewhat safe, but also, it's like they only speak a certain language, right? And like everybody's coming at them speaking the wrong language.
Yes.
So when they see that you see them, it's like boom.
It changes everything.
It changes everything, and it's usually relatively quick.
Yeah. And I like that you're saying this piece about outsourcing, because I think part of the problem of why teens feel so difficult for parents is parents are terrified.
Right.
The stakes are so much higher when you talk about the intensity ratcheted up.
Yes.
The stakes of getting hooked on drugs today or dabbling even in drugs when there's a fentanyl crisis. So many of these things are life-threatening. We used to have a little more room to mess up
Yes.
back in our day that
Totally.
these kids today don't have. Everything's recorded for forever, for posterity.
Yeah.
You make a mistake, it could be on social media. You don't get into college, you don't get a job, right? You take the wrong drug, you die. So it just feels like everything, the stakes are so high that parents are in there panicked, and that approach isn't always going to get through. So this is where somebody else coming in
Is helpful.
who isn't really in the system, whose emotions aren't activated in the same way, and who can speak the language that reaches this teen girl who's longing desperately for someone to show her a way out of her pain.
Yes.
I can really see the value
And
of that.
so many of the parents that call me are scared of their kids, right? It's like they're in a spot now where they can't move, right? Because if they push too hard, you can't do this or you can't do that, then the kids are different now. They just pop off, they leave, they run away. I can remember my daughter was really tough. And at 15, she would run away, and you're just tortured because you're like,
so unsafe.
Right. Like I ran away at 15. I can tell you this. My mom found me. It was like a day later. I thought I was going to be like on the cover. I thought I was going to be like on milk cartons, right? Like I thought everyone was going to be devastated, scared. I was so excited to just like torture the whole family. My mom walked into that house, pulled me out by my ear, and let me know that this is not the way it was going to go, that they both work full time. They don't have time for my bullshit. I better get my ass, it was like, and I was like, oh my God, like I never ran away again.
Wow.
But things are very different now. You say that to a kid now and they're just out.
Yeah.
So
And you know what? That wouldn't have worked on me. Like that could break. Every kid's different. Like I would have been like, okay, well, I'll just try harder,
I thought I would have been. I think there's also something to growing up poor. Like I grew up with no money. There was no resources. There was nothing. And like, you knew as a kid, like we had what we had. We had one TV. My mom won it at her work, like, I don't know. I think like I was really tough and I fought my mom tooth and nail.
Yeah.
But when things like that were said, you knew that they meant it.
Right. And that it was like survival.
Yeah, there was going to never be money for treatment. Like there just weren't resources,
Yeah. So you took it really seriously, got through it. Yeah. And I think you're right. It depends on the situation, depends on the kid. And thank God there are resources like what you're offering. But what advice would you give to parents who have a difficult teen or they perceive they have a difficult teen? And, maybe this kid would benefit from treatment, maybe they wouldn't. But just in general, parenting in this climate today, that you're saying we have to be so much more active and intentional.
Yeah.
You're right. The sleep at the wheel. I mean, that was the parenting of the 80s I grew up in. Wonderful, loving parents were like, no one had any clue what we were doing with anything. We can't do it now. So what would you tell these parents to parent more effectively in today's world?
Well, I think I've already said it, but outsourcing, but to me, that's a huge thing. I think first and foremost, you have to look under the hood, right? You have to be willing to take a peek at yourself, which isn't fun.
Get
It's
real.
a lot like your book, it's not super fun, right? But I think we all come to the parenting party with shit, we all bring our baggage.
Yeah.
And so whatever you're coming to the parenting party with, you're likely parenting from that place. And that's not always great. So I think you take a peek under the hood. Hopefully you're as healthy as you can be. And then I think when the kid isn't receptive, you outsource as much as you can. So whether that be a coach like I had, a teacher, whomever, an aunt, whatever it is, with my daughter, she was so difficult that I called them moles. I had people planted everywhere. She thought she had a trainer that wasn't a trainer. That was somebody who, she was a trainer, but she was also young and beautiful and super healthy. And as they were training weights, the girl would talk to her about not being promiscuous and being healthy. She was babysitting, but she was babysitting for a woman I knew who could help her with this. And so I had people everywhere at every turn to help my daughter because my daughter wasn't willing to listen to me. So I think part of it is being willing to outsource that. And I think, like you said, everyone's different and you are the expert in your kid, but you may not be able to reach them.
Right.
So knowing what station they'll listen to, and then it's your job to find that.
To provide that.
Yeah.
Do you take a stance at all? I'm just curious on a certain kind of parenting approach. Like, do you believe in, and we were talking about not having laissez-faire parenting.
Yes.
And this is such a valuable point because I realize we tend to parent, either we want to be not like our parents were, but we might end up doing it anyway, or we parent the way we were parented. I mean, I had very laissez-faire parents. They tried not to be, but I made them laissez-faire.
Yeah.
And then I kind of ended up like that too. And it worked well with one kid, but not the other. So do you take a stance on being really involved, having a lot of discipline versus being more removed and permissive?
Yeah, actually, in my book, there's a chapter called Parenting Techniques Gone Wild. And it sort of goes through all the different techniques and why none of them really are a one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
It's just like adults. I mean, everybody's different. So, gentle parenting works maybe if you have a gentle kid. My daughter came out middle fingers up. There was no gentle parenting that would have been impactful.
So what do you do with a kid who comes out like, fuck you, mom?
Yeah,
how do you approach
did.
that kind of kid?
Yeah, I mean, I figured out pretty young. I'll just give one quick example.
Yeah, please
There's
do.
a book called 1, 2, 3 Magic.
Okay.
And I bought it when my kids were little and I have twins. And so I would do this technique and it was very simple. It was literally that 1, 2, 3 and then magic was supposed to happen. So they're starting to do something and you say 1, 2, and it's to give them a warning that they then start to associate with, consequence or whatever. So I would do that. And by 2, my son would be like a soldier. He would hear 2 and he would stand up straighter. He would immediately conform. By 2, she would look at me like we were going to get in a fist fight in the front yard. It was like she would bow out, she would bow up her chest and she would
ready to fight.
She was like, what was 3? Like fist.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Bring it.
And so it was like a perfect example for me early of 2 things. 1, techniques aren't for every kid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And 2, she wasn't a 1, 2, 3 magic kid. And so I learned.
But it worked great for your son.
It worked great for my son. So it's the same thing as I imagine teachers do and trainers do. And you really have to become an expert in your kid and knowing how to navigate that. So for a kid like my daughter, which was so hard for me because I had so many convictions about how I wanted to parent. I was parenting more like the FAFO parenting, the fuck around and find out parenting. That's how my parents are. My dad was like, you fuck around, you find out. That was the end of the story.
Right.
And that is how he parented all 4 of us. And that was the end. So with my daughter, I tried that sort of stuff and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
And so around 14, I started to realize that I had to look at myself and I had to ask myself, why was I so invested in her behaving a particular way? Why did I want her to fit in this box? Why did I want that? And when I started investigating that and looking at myself, I was able to let her be a little more free.
Yeah.
She required more freedom than my son.
Yeah.
And so I had to start giving as much as I could, say yes as much as possible, so that when I needed to say no, it meant something.
I think that's really valuable for people listening, because I think it can be so scary as a parent to know when, okay, maybe I want to give freedom, but I'm scared that this kid's going to be unsafe or get in trouble or get hurt. And I like that idea of, okay, if a kid needs more freedom because they have a really strong personality and they need to express themselves and feel like they have some agency, give it where you can, and then make those no's, pick your battles and make them count.
And give it where you can with boundaries. And also something I did with my daughter, which I'm a huge advocate for, is to front load. So I would say, look, I didn't plan on letting you go to the mall alone until, another year or two, but I'm going to let you go to the mall alone today. And here's what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And if you can stay in this, then you can go to the mall alone.
Right. So give these kids a chance to earn this freedom, contained freedom with boundaries by, right? Like, here, I'm giving you, I wasn't going to do this, but you're giving them a chance to like earn more by proving to you that they can stick to the boundaries. But also I like what you're saying about you're going to have to really be an expert in each kid and have flexibility and nuance and adaptability. And often this may mean outsourcing and getting kids help because somebody else might be able to get through. And it's not necessarily a therapist. It might be a teacher, a coach, somebody you hire that you bring in who can help you figure out what's going on with your kid and get through to them.
It might be their friend's parent, if you can't afford to do. When my daughter was 14, I mean, she's a great example, but she used to want to go to this park and hang out with all these kids. And I was just tortured. I'm like, she's 14 years old. She was wild as a day is long, and I was so worried, but it was like the options were like, my brothers or people who had kids that conform would say, well, why didn't you just say no? Or why doesn't she not be allowed or get grounded or whatever? Sometimes those aren't options when you have a kid that is willing to run away, do fucked up things. Like,
what are you going to do?
Right. And it's often that I always say it should be called something different, because my brother's over here parenting a kid that's doing their homework, waking up to an alarm. Like, it's a different animal. When you have a kid that wakes up with their middle fingers up and they are not going to conform and you can feel it, you can take away whatever you want to. But when they don't care about the consequences, you're up against a wall. And the goal can't always just be to get them to conform, because ultimately the goal should be that they grow and that they're happy and they're successful and they flourish.
Exactly. That they're set up for adult life. You're teaching them.
Right. So sometimes you have to take a step back and say, okay, what are my goals here? And this path isn't working.
Right. Right. And then you've got to be able to adapt and get the help if you need it. So we've talked a lot about teenage girls, and I don't know if you work with this as much, but there's a real crisis for young men in today's world. Many young men, I think more than 60%, have never asked a woman on a date, a girl on a date. They're addicted to pornography. They're addicted to video games. They're isolating and withdrawing. Are you seeing a lot of that, those types of issues in your treatment centers, and any words of advice for parents dealing with those issues? Sure.
We have a adolescent treatment center in New Jersey. We take boys and girls. Specifically, I coach girls, but it all is rooted in the same thing. It comes from the same place, So I think the answer still lies in there's no parenting from the couch with a teenager. There's no having your feet up. We have to be alert. We have to know what's going on. It's the same thing with social media and technology, which is really where the porn comes from. And it's about open communication for your kids. And most importantly, it's about not having an ego in your parenting and not thinking that your kid is above anything. It's like parents are asleep at the wheel.
Right.
And we have to be aware of what's going on, what they're doing. And you don't want to be their friend, but you have to be in it enough that they feel safe talking to you.
Right. Right. To really get curious about, because I don't focus on parenting in my work with couples. I'm focused on their attachment bond. And then, of course, if they're good, this can help them deal with everything else in their
100%.
lives. But I do hear from so many people, God, we just can't get our kid out of the room. They're on the video, even if it's not pornography. I mean, these things are so dopamine inducing and addictive. So many kids at a time when their brain is so vulnerable, they're getting pulled into these things that make their brain ping.
For sure.
And they're spending their whole social life now online or on a video game.
But a lot of that too is the absolute parenting. So like, get out of your room. You can't do this. Get off of this. I really believe in working with and towards a little bit of collaboration. So listen, I know you want to be in your room, in the cold, in your bed, watching your video game, talking to your friend. I'm with you. Hang out with me for 45 minutes, sitting outside, throw the ball to the dog, and like talk to me about your day, and then go retreat to your room.
Love that.
You have to work with them,
Collaborate, meet them where they are, come
Yes.
alongside, and then guide. And then that way you're able to get in a little bit of what's good and healthy for
Yes.
them without the absolute of you will not retreat to your room
Yeah.
and play video games. That's brilliant.
Because
yeah.
immediately they retreat within themselves. Because in large part, teenagers feel misunderstood, right? They feel that you don't get them. That you'll hear that from every teenager on the planet. My mom does not understand
Oh,
me.
yeah.
You don't get it. You don't get me. So then they retreat to their room where that narrative grows.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I do a Tuesday night teenage girl call. And so we get on the phone and it's literally my favorite hour of the week. And, they're constantly, my mom, she's this, she's that, she doesn't understand me. I get to give them the perspective of a mother, of their mom.
Right.
But also it reminds me that we're the adult. We have to be smarter, be bigger, and work with them. They want to do this. We want them to do that. So the first thing is to identify, I see you.
Yeah.
I know
you have to validate
and
and join.
And throw a few curse words in the mix. I mean, you have to speak their language. It really isn't rocket science. Teenagers are my favorite people on earth. They're amazing. You just have to speak their language.
I love that. It's so true. And I think this idea of outsourcing and getting help, because the reality is you can't be asleep at the wheel, but you really may need that other person that your teen is willing to let down the guard with a little bit much more easily than they sometimes will with a parent. I mean, it just really makes sense. I would tell you still today, my mom and I talk every day. I'm 52 years old. She did not understand me as a teenager. Yeah. I stand by it, right? It's so true.
I stand by it too. My mom would stand by it.
Yes.
She was perplexed.
Yes.
And I think she would admit it.
I think my mom would tell you I nearly killed her, but just with worry and stress and anxiety. But this is such a huge thing. Parenting today is different. So any final words of wisdom that you want to leave our listeners with?
I would like to leave the listeners with this. I took my daughter to a therapist when she was very young. And the woman, after spending some time with her, came out and said, I've got good news and bad news. She said, the bad news is she's going to be very tough to raise. She said, the good news is she will never, ever be talked into anything she doesn't want to do, because she's not going to fall victim to peer pressure. She's not going to be talked into shit. And let me tell you what, she's 19 years old. She's amazing. You couldn't talk her into anything if you tried, but she was hell on earth to parent. And so a lot of the kids that are tough to parent turn out to be some of the most amazing, strong adults.
I agree with that. I've seen that in my own trajectory and in life, right? Like a strong will, a strong personality can make for a great adult.
Yeah, you can't have both. It's like a husband, you know what I mean? And you can't have a kid that's in line and perfect and pays attention and easy, and then they're just going to pop out to be dynamic, have a voice, comfortable talking. Life doesn't work like that.
Totally.
So I think, take your hits while they're young, and you'll have a dynamic adult.
I love that. So true. Okay, so tell our listeners where they can find you,
Okay.
when your book is coming out, all that good stuff.
Yes. So my book is coming out in a year. It will be called Cake for Dinner. So keep an eye out for that. My website is www.keeshascott.com. Instagram, I'm at Keesha W. Scott. And Guardian Recovery website. They can also find us there if they have specific substance use issues.
Wonderful. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be reaching out, and you guys follow Keesha. Her stuff is wonderful. Your book's going to be great.
Thank you.
And you're going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much for being our guest on Insights from the Couch. We loved having you.
Awesome. Thank you.